Hey, it's the Cheap Bonding with Board Games and RPGs. We're going to do a nice little quick review on Assault Sicily 1943. Just says 43, but it's 1943 Gela Beachhead. So it's going to be Western Front because you've already seen me do the Eastern Front with Assault Red Horizon 41. And if you thought this was a big box, it can actually disappear behind this one. So they've been made even bigger. Let's go in and take a look at some of these beautiful geomorphic boards. They are so big, which is why the box is so big. You even have these little quarter ones or half ones, but they even have smaller little pieces that can go on to make trenches and fortifications and minefields and beach obstacles. Let's go in and take a look at that now, and then we'll come back out. We'll talk about the dice, the wonderful lay flat rule book, and all the player aids which you're about to see. Okay, I'm zoomed out, showing you an overall of cards and helper aids and geomorphic boards. But first, let me tell you how big these boards really are. So here is a geomorphic board. So you can see we got double-sided. These are all double-sided, but how big is this really? You can't quite tell. Well, that board is so big that my copy of Pandemic, which many people have, doesn't even come close to covering it, which is why the main box for Assault is so big. And you can just see that we have the beach. So this is all Western Front, as you already know, but we're moving in and then we're getting into like a little village. So I wanted you to first understand how grand, how big this game truly is. So we'll come over top in a second, but here you'll see the dice, which will help you resolve combat. You'll see the cards, which one card of a type, like a German 43, one card could represent multiple different units that are on the board, but the cards and the dice help make the system kind of fun to play. I almost think of like it's fun to drive a BMW, but I wouldn't know the complexities of like fixing it or everything that's going on underneath. So the cards and the dice, they will lighten the load for the gameplay, but there is, in my opinion, a lot of minutia in the rules where it can still get a little crunchy. So it's very nice to have the dice and the cards to streamline things. So I wanted to show an overview of several units. You have your American units, you have Ranger and Airborne, you have some Italian units, and then you have several German units. I'm also going to pop over and show some tanks, both German, Tiger E, a Sherman, an M10, and an Italian M14. And then I will point out the color coordination, which you can kind of see here and in the defensive up here. And then we'll show how the dice work. You can also see I've got some units scattered around. So again, as I've already stated, you might have a Ranger unit and you could have multiple different Ranger units that are on the table, but you would only have one card. So it keeps your clutter down on the table because that one card will tell you how each of those Ranger units is going to function. So first I'm going to use a pointer. This is just a stopper for one of my whiskey bottles. But this would be defensive dice that I would use if I were in charge of the Tiger tank and it were being attacked. So to the rear, to the side, to the front, and a top attack. So for instance, to the rear, you can see it would be 2 red dice and a green die. I would go select the matching die, put them in my hand, and roll them. We'll come to the results in a second. If the Ranger unit were attacking, you can see down here is where they would attack. This is if they're attacking artillery or an AT gun or other infantry, so you can see they have range. Obviously, their damage against the tank is going to be in the exact same hex only, close combat. And in this particular case, they would get a blue and a yellow die, and the German would be rolling its 2 green die. So the German player would come in, grab 2 greens, roll them. They landed on there. That would be a hit marker. There's hits, blanks or misses. There's suppression, which is X, and a possible critical hit, which is the skull and crossbones, also counts as a hit. And then what are my Rangers rolling again? Yellow and blue. And I do have them ranked in the more deadly of the versions. So obviously a yellow, you've got more sides that have hits. I'll put a screenshot in right here that will show you that, yellow and blue. So this would be the Tiger defense die, and they're going to be able to minus a hit off of whatever I get already, which means this may be fruitless. Oh, or not. Hold on, you can't quite see this one. Look at this. So very interestingly, the Rangers ended up getting 2 hits. They would minus off 1 because this would get rid of one of these, and you would have 1 successful hit. The card itself, I'll probably show a blown up version because you can just see the little hearts there. That 1 hit would end up taking one of those hearts off. So if it was the very last one, maybe you've just destroyed the vehicle. Now, I've simplified that because there's some things that would pop in. Terrain. Now, in this case, infantry going against a vehicle in the same hex close combat, you can ignore terrain, but the units themselves would have an advantage with the terrain. So you can imagine a bunch of rocky terrain. My units would get the advantage, my Rangers would get the advantage of that cover, but the vehicle would not. The vehicle's so big that the cover's not helping out. Or maybe it's shrubs. So the shrubs, obviously a Tiger could roll right over the shrubs. Well, the shrubs aren't helping the Tiger at all, but they would help conceal, wouldn't be much for cover, but they would help conceal my Rangers. So you can see how you would get a terrain benefit. Now there's also other sub-rules under this, and that is where the game can get a little technical, but you can see the basics are, look at the card, tells you everything you need to know as far as hit probability, roll your dice for that randomizer, and then subtract or deal with the results and apply the damage. So we can see the other tanks here, but let me bring in this case, just some German guns. You can see how the ranges are different and how they now have a much better capability of hitting armor. And of course, if you want to go for the terrifying 88, you can see you would be rolling even better die or dice. All right, in a very simple way, I just wanted to show line of sight. So this is a tactical war game. So a tank is a single tank. You may have multiple tanks. You would still only have 1 card, but you may have 2 or 3 Tigers. That would be interesting. Or like in this case, you may have several infantry units. You can see my Grenadiers. One's up here on the 2nd floor of this church, so he's got a good line of sight. You can see the Shermans holding the intersection and just this other unit over here in a little like farmhouse. I've got an airborne troop sitting here, and then they've joined up with some Rangers that are sitting in here looking at the problem. Hopefully they have not been spotted because their building, I'm sure, would come under fire. For line of sight, you're simply drawing it from the center of a hex terrain piece to another hex. Like all tactical games, you have to be able to kind of put yourself down in the position of the real people. Obviously, if you're moving from here to here, it would take another movement to get up to the 2nd height. But once you're at that altitude, your line of sight would no longer be the ground floor. You would be the next level up. So that building right in front of you wouldn't block your view. Now the card tells you everything you need to know. On that upper right-hand corner, you can see your base movement allowance and then the movement type. And you can simply see feet or tracks. So this is just how far you can move with your basics. Now, obviously, if you're moving through woods or rough terrain, it all changes, but you would just use the modification for the type of terrain you're in. You also have real simple markers. Again, look at the inserted photo. That allows you to display if a unit is a recruit. Or are they hardened? You know, they've seen combat. Or they're veteran. They've seen a lot of combat. Or they're elite. You know, these are not only the airborne troops, but they've been through a couple drops, combat drops already. So these are elite combat units. You can see your player actions as far as ranged combat. You can spot for other units, which is perfect. I was in a light infantry unit. These extremely nice boards just take a look. These are like beautiful, finished, polished boards. Fortification chart, experience levels, close combat, attack dice, defense dice, the ranged fire aid. The flip side, again, gorgeous, easy, touchable modifications to your defense dice. Now, part of what you're seeing is you're seeing some of the complexity. Now you have aids, you have multiple aids, so off-board artillery support. You can see all the information is here, but there's quite a bit. We also have tactical air support. Now this is nice because these rules and these rules aren't going to be used as often, so they're on the same table. But you can see, okay, I don't need to go flipping the book. I can just grab this, which is sitting on the table, and take a look. And then we have our terrain chart. It's double-sided. Back in my day, this would be on the back of a rule book if the company was really good. But there's so much here that it's better here that it is on this helper aid. Now, there is so much terrain. They've even added new terrain types in this kind of second rules or updated rules of the game. But here you can see where you're getting defense bonuses. You can see your movement costs, whether you're on foot or whether you're tracked or whether you're wheeled to certain types of terrain block line of sight. Well, of course, certain types will. You get into your buildings, you get into your hills, you get into your big forests, and you get into your scrub brush or, whatever. So with the rules, you can see there is a bit of overhead in the rules, but you have all the helper aids to help you move through it, to help you internalize it, and to help you to reference it while you're playing, while you, again, use the cards to mirror the troops, keeping your table clutter down, and the dice to work out the values. The idea of using the cards to represent the units and then the dice tied in with the probabilities to hit, and then all the factors that go into that are what I love about tactical games and how it's done, in this case, with these dice. And to keep the clutter down, the card gives you all the information. All the chit does is show your location, and if you were to flip it over, if it gets knocked down to half strength, you can now visually see, oh, that unit is in a little bit of trouble. It's a very clean interface with really gorgeous boards. And of course, you now have the option with this version to be on the Western Front. So you can be Eastern Front, Western Front. There's all kinds of ability to change up the scenarios, the units you're in. We'll talk more about that when I'm on the other side here. I just wanted to show you a close-up look. All right, we're back. So probably the main takeaway I wanted folks to get from this is the understanding of this is tactical. Some folks love tactical, me. Some like operational, some want strategic. You need to know that going in. It's quite a big box. Now you know why. It's because of these huge tiles, which make for a very fun tactical visual display. It's one of the things I really love. One, tactical is you get the lay of the land. You have to understand your line of sight. The rules here are very clear on that. You can see the hexes. The hexes are very oversized. These are probably some of the bigger hexes that I've seen over some of the other games I've played. And then the question comes down, do you love rolling lots of dice? I do. Do you then like rolling dice that have the values baked into them? I do. But again, you've got to know that. So that's why I kind of just featured that as we went in. You need to understand the card has all the probabilities figured out as far as range and angle and type of defense or type of attack. Select your dice, and then there's a little bit of randomness involved. And you just deal with that as you would on the combat zone, in the combat zone. Now, well, we'll come back to these. This rule book is awesome. I used to hate anything that was kind of spiral bound, but the longer I've played, the more I love the lay flat ability. It's just awesome. Before, you're having to flex it down, and this is so thick just as the rule book, that the ability to just layer down flat or even to just flip it over if you're looking at it is perfect. There's tons and tons of scenarios that come with this game. I didn't even touch on them, but there is a plethora. We'll talk about all the helper aids, and then we'll just kind of reference a few things and close on out of here. Really the beauty and the polish on these aids is top notch. I'm used to little flimsy, cardstock kind of plasticky things. These are more like very strong backer boards, but even thicker than that for like a comic book or something. And then all the polish, it feels like the rule sheet just printed right on top of it. Here's the kicker. You're going to need these. I play too many games. I don't just pick one and run with it. That could be my issue. But I need the helper aids, and I need to come in and remind myself, how does this work again? Or close combat against a tank. Do I go against the rear armor? No, it's the top. It's always the top armor. Okay, so I need to come in and reference, how does this work? How does ranged fire work? Okay, I know how ranged fire works, but what about spotting? Or definitely tactical air support? How does that work? Or all the different range and, how do I move through this? What's the movement cost? All of that is extremely necessary to have these. Sometimes that overhead can get to me. The simplicity of the system with the cards and the dice is needed because there's some layers of complexity as you look down into the game. I had an example. Where is it? So also within the game, you have command points. And the better your command or leadership is, the more command points you will have. And you will use those command points to activate units, which is great, brilliant. A lot of games do this so that I can't activate every single unit on the board. I have to make some tough choices, and my opponent doesn't know what will be activated and what won't be. But a big part of tactical combat is being able to move with covering fire. So there's a rule for this. Now I'm going to read this section out with the important note so you can see where there's some complexity that you would have to hold on to within the game. So this is 9.13, movement with covering fire. Hugely important. This special movement action activates 2 adjacent units at the same time. Okay, good to know. 1 unit moves with fast or normal actions. You can go back and look at that. That's your MU, or your movement unit. While the second unit fires covering fire, that unit is called the FU. First of all, it's funny because if I say FU, that means curse word U, but that's fine, firing unit. There's a little note here, like a rules note. If playing with command points, you don't have to, it's optional, but command points are awesome. 2 command points are needed, so you would have to use 2 command points to activate both the moving unit and the firing unit. The MU, movement unit, also receives the strongest attack die of the FU in addition to its defense dice due to the covering fire. So as you're reading that, you're like, what? Well, the firing unit is basically going to lend over its strongest attack die. So if it has a red, the moving unit will receive that red die from the firing unit in addition to its defense dice due to the covering fire. So if someone shoots at it, it has now picked up, in my hypothetical situation, a red die, which is nice, which also means that you're encouraged to use a unit that has a higher, deadlier volume of fire because you're going to get that highest attack dice to use in your defense pool. So I love this. I mean, I don't dislike this at all. Let me read a little further and then I'll tell you what the difficulty is here if you're not picking it up already. In addition to the defense dice due to the covering fire, check the attack dice of the FU unit card. No problem, you're going to look at the attack dice. Oh, there's a red. I'm going to get to use that as my defense. Then there's an important note. Covering fire can only be used once for an enemy reaction fire action. The player of the MU, the moving unit, decides when the covering fire effect starts. Then it goes on with 2 more paragraphs I'll read quickly. To use this effect of covering fire, the FU must have line of sight, free of hindered, to the reacting unit. If the FU cannot attack the reacting unit according to its values on the unit card, covering fire is not possible. Now all that makes sense. If the covering unit or the firing unit can't fire into a hex because its line of sight is blocked, well, obviously they wouldn't be able to help. So I get it. If the covering unit is marked with a -1 attack dice or already reduced to half strength, that's when you flip the counter over, the next weakest die color is used instead of the strongest die. If the weakest die is already blue, it is used. And kind of there's the problem for me. So I love all this, the cards, the explanation, this all makes sense, but this is just movement with covering fire. And there are a few other sections that are like this where I just know I would have to dedicate this. I would have to make this my main go-to game to kind of keep that in my head. I totally get it. It totally makes sense even as I read it. I understand that the firing unit would have to be able to put suppressive fire into the area. Got it. I love the idea that I get the highest attack die, let's assume red, and I get to use it to my defense. That makes perfect sense, and it encourages the use of a unit that has good firepower. Love it. But then you start to get into, well, if you got a -1, you got to step it down. But if it's a blue, which is at the bottom, it's still going to be blue. Yeah, that makes sense. And then what if it's flipped? But that's where I think I would start to be like, what? What do I do with that now? It gets a little into the weeds every once in a while. So there is a love in this game. There is a detail in this game, and there are optional rules galore. Well, here's the beauty of Wargamers anyway. If I was playing a novice and I had played 100 games of this, and I had all these rules internalized, I would facilitate the play with my opponent. I wouldn't just stomp them. I'd just be like, hey, do you want to do covering fire while you move? If you did that, my unit that you can see in the building, you could basically put suppressive fire on the building. Now, obviously, if you pick this unit over here, he can't see the building, so it wouldn't help you in this case. And I think my opponent would go, oh, that makes sense. And I would leave off the, hey, if there's a -1 and the step down, because then he'd be like, you need to know there's a layer of complexity that you may not suspect based on the cards and the dice roll. I've had some players say, oh, is it overly simplified? No. This helps you simplify a system that actually has some complexity to it within the rule set. And there are some occasional caveats that I just know as I play, I'll forget. But that's all right. That could just be me. I might be a dunderhead. Chief, bonding with board games and RPGs. I love Tactical World War II. It is my jam. It's my favorite area. I'm so thrilled to have this game. I'm trying to think. I don't think I have any tactical Sicily games at all. Now I do. Chief, bonding with board games and RPGs. See ya. Bye.